It's the biggest interest rate cut in 3 years, a half a percentage point. That brings the official cash rate to 3.75%, approaching the historic lows set during the global financial crisis. We'll be joined by the Treasurer, Wayne Swan, shortly. But as Heather Hewitt reports, this time next week he'll be delivering a budget, which he insists will be in a surplus and hoping it will help heave the Gillard government out of its political morass.
Okay, rice, everyone?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
No one has waited more eagerly for today's interest rate announcement than all those Australians with mortgages and daily cost pressures. Canberra mother Edwina Nelson is one of them. She and her 4 children rely on her husband's income.
It will alleviate the family budget pressures for our family. It will give us a bit more spending money, definitely, so that would be a great help to our family.
Does anyone want more chicken?
They'd like to see a second interest rate cut sooner rather than later, because that might enable this family to accumulate some savings.
Finish it all off.
We pay the bills, we essentially live pay to pay, so definitely a second interest rate cut would help us with that.
1, 2, 3.
Good work.
Amongst the friends I have, we talk about this in great detail. It's a pay-to-pay existence for a lot of us.
This goes some way to explaining why the government was sweating on the Reserve Bank finally making a decision to cut rates, and why politicians of all persuasions were urging the big 4 banks to quickly follow through.
Everyone out there has been hanging out for this rate cut. It is here, it is welcome, and people do want to experience it in their pocket.
The problem under this government has been that so many of those interest rate cuts haven't been passed on by the banks. So I call on the banks to pass on in full any interest rate cut.
The economists were on side as well, with some suggesting the Reserve Bank decision was long overdue.
Well, I think 0.5% is what was required. They should have cut earlier. They should have cut in February, March and April. So we already should have had 0.5%, but so now it's definitely worth 0.5%, and they should cut some more. Australian interest rates are higher than most in the world, and our economy is not booming.
There are a lot of sectors, a lot of states in pain. That's turned out to be a bit worse than they'd expected, and the latest inflation news was a bit better than they expected, and that gave them enough confidence. Well, look, we can do this, and maybe should have moved earlier.
Now all eyes turn to next week's federal budget, which could also have an impact on future rate cuts. The government is keen for it to act as a political circuit breaker after days of bad headlines. It's promised a budget surplus, but has the Reserve Bank's failure to act sooner on rates made that task even harder?
The fact that the Reserve Bank has left interest rates too high for too long has meant that the economy is slower than it should be. I mean, it's really kind of slowing down quite rapidly, and that's going to have a big impact on the budget in particular. I mean, it isn't going to be easy now for the government to forecast strong economic growth over the next couple of years, which would then turn into the budget surplus that they so desperately require.
Look, this one will have to be tough. The government previously has done a bit of talking tough, but then the budget itself maybe not as tough as it's talked. This time I don't think they've got that option.
There's going to be a surplus. It's going to be therefore one of the biggest turnarounds from deficit to surplus, the fastest turnarounds and the biggest in Australia's history, and one of the biggest anywhere in the world. So it's a dramatic event, this budget, really huge.
That means deep cuts in a wide range of areas and reducing tax break measures expected to hit Australians who are better off.
You're talking about superannuation, you're talking about living away from home allowances, and cuts that will affect the bits of the economy that are going most strongly. So, there've been talk that some of the things that would affect miners the most, some of those tax arrangements would change. Diesel fuel rebates.
Obviously they're going to put the pressure on the public service and increase the what they call the efficiency dividend, which means basically, fewer public service jobs.
And every bit of the budget will come under scrutiny. Areas such as defence.
Defence is already bracing for the worst. Former Army Chief Peter Lay isn't happy with the signals he's getting.
Given the broader aspect of the government intention to make reductions and to achieve a surplus, it's pretty clear to me that there will be cuts in defence. I'm hearing some very awful rumours in the order of 5 or 10%. It could constitute a pretty hard clobbering for Defence.
A clobbering that he says could run to the order of at least $2 billion. It may include the scrapping of plans to buy a dozen high-tech artillery pieces, delaying the purchase of joint strike fighters and making cuts to personnel.
I think the Army's going to be looked at as an easy target, but that's going to be a mistake. One, we're not out of Afghanistan yet. We might have declared transition, but victory, I think, is a long way off. We also need to look at our near region and the sorts of activities that could occur out there. It is an unstable area. We've got the coup situation in Fiji, we've still had problems in the Solomon Islands with governance, and we're looking at elections in Papua New Guinea at the moment.
The message is that if there are deep cuts, the government needs to rethink the role of Defence and what it can deliver. And that leads straight back to the debate about whether this is the right time for a budget surplus.
I think it's going to have an unduly disproportional impact on a whole range of Commonwealth services. So I think what we're looking at is political reason rather than sound economic and capability reasons.
I think it's okay as long as they use smoke and mirrors and don't make it a real budget surplus turnaround. What I mean by that is it's all about politics, it's not about economics. The economy does not need a surplus at the moment economically, but the government needs it politically. There's no question about that.
I mean, I can see as a overall objective that a government in surplus is a necessary thing, but when you're a struggling family, it's about the here and now, the day-to-day.
There's no going back now. In political terms, a surplus has come to represent sound economic management, as both sides wrangle over which party has the better credentials.
Political editor Heather Ewart.